Let me ask you a question. Where are all the intelligent people? Are they slowly disappearing from society? Or are they simply being born in fewer numbers? Or perhaps are they still here, but withdrawing, fading quietly into the background? Somewhere under a video related to this topic, I once read a comment I can't fully forget. It said, "That single inversion changes everything." Look around. We live in an age of constant performance. Opinions are shouted, outrage is rewarded, speed is valued more than depth, popularity outweighs precision. The loudest voices dominate the room, not the most thoughtful ones, so the question becomes uncomfortable. In a society that rewards visibility over understanding, what happens to those who think too deeply? What happens to those who question everything? Topics like this always pull me toward Arthur Schopenhauer, because honestly, few writers have dissected the psychological cost of intelligence as brutally as he did. So let's explore these questions carefully. Are intelligent people truly vanishing from society? Or is society slowly becoming inhospitable to intelligence itself? From the very beginning, Schopenhauer made something clear. Highly intelligent or ingenious individuals are naturally inclined toward withdrawal. He observed that after gaining some acquaintance with so-called human beings, a gifted person will often choose seclusion and, if in possession of a great mind, even solitude. Why would someone capable of deep thought choose isolation? Because as Schopenhauer believed, the more a person has within themselves, the less they require from the outside world. A mind rich with ideas, imagination, and inner dialogue does not crave constant stimulation. It generates its own. In his blunt, unsentimental way, he wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." That statement sounds harsh, almost accusatory, but Schopenhauer meant something very specific. The intellectually driven person finds far greater satisfaction in reflection, creativity, and deep inquiry than in idle chatter or social rituals. Small talk feels exhausting. Superficial games feel pointless. The inner world is simply more compelling. He goes even further. And this is where he completely flips society's judgment on its head. To call someone unsociable, he suggests, is often nearly the same as saying he is a man of great capacity. What most people interpret as aloofness, shyness, or even arrogance may actually be a sign of depth. In one of his most provocative remarks, he writes, "Rascals are always sociable. More's the pity. And the chief sign that a man has any nobility in his character is the little pleasure he takes in others' company." In other words, the more noble, meaning intellectually and spiritually elevated, a person is, the less dependent they become on constant companionship. The noble individual eventually realizes that the world often offers only two choices: solitude on one side and vulgarity on the other. That is a brutal conclusion. It suggests that the intelligent person does not retreat out of hatred for humanity, but out of necessity. Their internal life becomes so vivid, so consuming, that social interaction begins to feel optional at best and draining at worst. And this isn't just 19th century pessimism. Modern psychology quietly confirms what Schopenhauer intuited. Highly gifted individuals often find themselves out on the end of the bell curve, where equals are rare. Only a handful in thousands may share their intensity of curiosity or intellectual appetite. Conversations that excite them may bore others. Questions that obsess them may seem irrelevant to the crowd. Jungian psychology would even describe such individuals as strongly introverted, not shy, but inwardly oriented. They draw energy from reflection. Schopenhauer described this inner split beautifully. The intelligent person, he said, eventually leads two lives, a personal and an intellectual life. The latter gradually comes to be looked upon as the true one. and that true life, the intellectual one, requires protection. It requires silence. It requires distance. It requires solitude. If solitude feels like home to the intelligent mind, society can feel like a marketplace at full volume. Schopenhauer did not hesitate to say what most people only think privately. He wrote that the worst thing in the world is society. That sounds extreme, but what he meant was this. Social life, as it is commonly lived, is saturated with trivial talk, wasted time, posturing, distraction, and endless noise. Imagine a highly intelligent person at a loud party. The music is blaring. Conversations skim the surface. Laughter erupts over things that feel insignificant. For the average person, this is fun. For the reflective mind, it can feel like sandpaper rubbing against fine wood. Schopenhauer observed that when one carefully surveys humanity, one often finds none but defective specimens, which it is advisable to leave in peace. Harsh? Absolutely. But he was describing the disillusionment that can set in when a perceptive mind repeatedly encounters pettiness, vanity, and shallow ambition. Over time, the intelligent individual becomes jaded. He sees patterns, he sees pretenses, he sees how easily people are driven by status, gossip, or the need to belong. And what once felt like companionship begins to feel like performance. Schopenhauer even argued that many ordinary amusements, card playing, gossip, constant entertainment, are merely a tickling of the will. They reveal not depth, but a kind of intellectual bankruptcy. According to him, when average individuals lose their usual pursuits, wealth, reputation, trivial pleasures, they quickly fall into intolerable boredom. They cling to distraction because silence would force them to confront emptiness. The intelligent person, however, experiences this differently. He does not fear silence. He fears meaninglessness disguised as noise. The cheerful chatter of a group may only deepen his sense of isolation because he feels no true meeting of minds. In one particularly controversial example, Schopenhauer cited a newspaper report claiming that American blacks crowded together in small spaces because they cannot have too much of one another's snub-nosed company. He used this as an illustration of his belief that those at the bottom of the intellectual scale are often the most gregarious. Today, we rightly recognize the racism embedded in that example. But the underlying philosophical claim he was making was this: people with lower intellectual demands often seek constant company, while the more educated or intellectually developed person recoils from it. Schopenhauer draws a stark contrast between the life of the masses, which he describes as one long, dull record of struggle to petty interests, and the life of the intellectual, which is rich in thought and full of life and meaning. According to Schopenhauer, intelligence does not just expand understanding, it expands suffering. In The Wisdom of Life, he writes, "With the growth of intelligence comes increased capacity for pain, and it is only with the highest degree of intelligence that suffering reaches its supreme point." That is not poetic exaggeration. It is psychological observation. The more aware you are, the more you notice. The more you notice, the more you feel. And the more you feel, the heavier existence becomes. An ordinary person may brush off a disappointment. A highly intelligent person analyzes it from every angle. They imagine consequences. They foresee patterns. They replay mistakes in their mind with brutal clarity. An error in judgment is not just embarrassing. It is agonizing because they fully grasp its implications. Intelligence sharpens perception, but it also sharpens pain. Schopenhauer believed that optimists imagine a world of endless comfort and pleasure. But he argued that even if such a paradise existed, it would quickly descend into unbearable boredom. Human life, he insisted, oscillates between suffering and boredom. And the more perceptive a person is, the more clearly they see this tragic rhythm. For the intelligent individual, the world is not just noisy, it is tragic. They notice injustice others ignore. They sense the absurdity beneath social conventions. They recognize how many pursuits are ultimately futile. It is like having an antenna tuned to frequencies most people cannot detect. Every hypocrisy, every cruelty, every falsehood registers, and that constant awareness can feel overwhelming. Psychologically, this resembles high emotional sensitivity. Many gifted individuals are also deep feelers. They overthink. They empathize intensely. They cannot easily detach from suffering, whether it is their own or someone else's. As a result, withdrawal becomes a protective strategy. If society cannot stimulate their mind, it can at least wound it through misunderstanding, moral conflict, betrayal, or simple intellectual isolation. Each new engagement carries the risk of frustration or hurt. So some choose distance, not out of arrogance, not out of hatred, but out of self-preservation. Schopenhauer contrasts the ordinary person, who seeks constant distraction to escape the emptiness of solitude, with the intellectual, who experiences solitude very differently. He writes that for the thinker, solitude places him in a sphere where pain is an alien, a diviner air where the gods live serene. At a certain point, the intelligent individual no longer withdraws because society is shallow, nor because it is noisy, nor even because it is painful. He withdraws because he no longer needs it. Schopenhauer observed that rare individuals, the philosopher, the genius, the deeply reflective mind, eventually construct an inner world so rich that it begins to outweigh the external one. He writes that such a person leads two lives, a personal and an intellectual life, and gradually the intellectual life becomes the true one. This is not metaphorical. It means that what most people seek externally, validation, companionship, stimulation, entertainment, achievement, the intellectual increasingly finds within himself. Thought becomes companionship, creation becomes fulfillment, reflection becomes nourishment. And when your deepest satisfactions are internal, the external world begins to feel optional. Schopenhauer makes this strikingly clear. Undisturbed occupation with himself, his own thoughts and works, is a matter of urgent necessity to such a man. Solitude is welcome, leisure is the highest good, and everything else is unnecessary. Notice the intensity of that statement. Not inconvenient, not distracting, unnecessary. For the self-sufficient mind, constant social engagement does not enhance life. It interrupts it. Companionship, career ambition, status games, these can become obstacles to the intellectual life rather than contributors to it. Schopenhauer even describes such individuals as moving among mankind as alien beings. He notes that in their thoughts, they begin to say they instead of we when referring to humanity. That small linguistic shift reveals a profound psychological distance. It is not hatred, it is not superiority, it is disidentification. They no longer feel fully part of the crowd. Psychologically, this resembles extreme introversion combined with deep internal fulfillment. Such individuals may still maintain relationships. They may love, converse, and participate. But, as Schopenhauer suggests, they are not inconsolable for the loss of everything else. If external ties were severed, their inner world would still sustain them. They vanish into books, into research, into art, into philosophy, into long hours of silent contemplation. But from the inside, nothing has been lost. In fact, something has been gained: autonomy. And perhaps Schopenhauer captures this final truth best with one of his most piercing lines. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom.